Okay, I'm back. I was erroneously ended on Instagram, so I'm starting over. I started by honoring my ancestors, so I'll do that again. I am the daughter of Deborah Ann Montoya and Carlos de Anda Vasquez. I am the granddaughter of Cecilia and Cristobal Montoya and Cruz and Alfredo Vasquez. I am the great granddaughter of Felicita, her sister Estefana, who raised my grandmother, of Carlos and Eutimia, and Papa Juan, and Mama Andrea, and Mama Kika. I have come to help heal the world and heal myself. And the original desire to share this was really expressing to all people, no matter what color your skin is, no matter who your ancestors are, that it is the most important thing right now to heal ourselves of our own internalized racism, our own internalized self-hatred because of white supremacy. So I want to talk about why white supremacy has kind of fucked us all over, and not honoring who we are in general. So I grew up from a mixed family, and when I say mixed family, I don't mean like one of my parents was one thing and one of my parents was another thing. Both of my parents and both of their parents and all of their parents were indigenous and or European from conquest, and most of them were mixed themselves. The only full-blooded indigenous people I know in my family were from my mother's father's mother, who I'm named for Eutimia, and she was from the Picuris Pueblo, and her husband was a Spanish man who there are rumors that she was bought from them, but from the Picuris Pueblo as a slave and or wife to my great grandfather. And my mother's father, whose story goes was a Dene man who raped my grandmother's mother, who was mixed blood of Arapaho and Apache and Spanish descent. So I was talking about the Genizaros. The Genizaros are the mixed blood people who were literally put as walls around the Spanish settlements to be attacked by the indigenous peoples instead of the Spanish people. So the mixed blood people were literally completely taken over as or taken as not valuable in their own bodies, and had to fight off their own people from being killed by them. So it was a pretty effed up existence. So fast forward to the civil rights movement. My parents met during the Chicano civil rights movement. My father's from the Central Valley. His parents were from El Paso, and they moved to the Central Valley to be farm workers. Met my mom, and my mom was a member of the Crusade for Justice. My father was a member of Teatro Campesino, and they met singing movement songs. And my mother raised me on what's now called the Red Road. Okay, so the Red Road is what is referred to as, I believe, from what I know, the ceremony way of different kinds of indigenous people. So the Indigenous Diaspora, I've been calling it, because we're also mixed up. If you're a Chicano, if you are a brown person with a Spanish name in this country, you are indigenous to Turtle Island, you are indigenous to this land, and you have probably a lot of different kinds of indigenous blood in you, because brown people kept marrying brown people because of racism, right? Because what happened historically was the Spanish landed, I believe in 1592 in like the Yucatan Peninsula, and then they went up, and about 50 years later, Coronado took an expedition into what is now Texas, New Mexico, California, and brought slaves, indigenous slaves, African slaves. and mixed in with all the indigenous up here. Okay, so we all have Chicano people or brown people in the United States of America. If you don't know your indigenous ancestry, know that you are most likely the progeny of the Spanish conquistadores, who also brought with them French, and they were all like rogues. The ones that they sent away to the New World were the ones who owed services to the royalty because they weren't your model citizen. Those are the ones who came up and brought the indigenous people with them from the South too. So if you have indigenous ancestors from the United States of America, what is now the United States of America, you probably also have indigenous ancestors from Mexico along the way, and African ancestors from the African diaspora, the slave trade, as well as the European colonial ancestors from the South. Now then what happened after 1776, after the Mayflower came over with another set of European rogues, again, the people who conquered and colonized the United States of America were not your like upstanding citizens from Europe, okay? They were the throwaways, if you will. They were the thieves and the rapists and the tricksters, etc., from Europe that got sent over here to start. They were also the ones trying to leave for freedom, which, that's fucking funny, right? Talk about irony, is that the word? For religious freedom, so they could come be some kind of religious free. Mind you, an aside, the Native American Religious Rights Act didn't get passed until 1965, okay? So then around the 1700s, so then the Spanish and indigenous and African moving up south into New Mexico, into Texas, into Califaslan, into Arizona, etc., happened during the 1600s. And then from the east coast, from New England, there came the Manifest Destiny. Okay, there came the white European settlers from England and more the Irish and more north, but it was mostly the Angleterre, the English-centered ones who came with this like whiteness thing. Oh, we're gonna make everyone white. We're gonna erase everybody's indigenousness. We're gonna erase everybody's otherness and create whiteness. So those were the Manifest Destinyers, as I call them, from the east. And then they came and they colonized as well. They killed a bunch of natives on the way. That's the Trail of Tears. There's a lot of history there that is hidden from us or normalized in our American history books. I can't even begin all of that. Anyways, I'm being vulnerable right here about my shit. So then my people, or like New Mexican mixed bloods who were once colonized by the Spanish and then made to be outsiders in their own homeland because they were now part Spanish and part Indian and weren't accepted by the indigenous and weren't accepted by the Spanish. Then come the Manifest Destinyers, New Englanders, talking about they own everything, which now they did because they raped and pillaged and killed a bunch of people, as well as with their wealth that they got off the backs of black Americans, enslaved humans from Africa, and now mixed with slave owners because they were all rapists. At least most of them. I mean, all of them. Let's keep it real. They all came west trying to own everything and recolonized my people. So now, regardless of whether you were a light-skinned Spanish or a dark-skinned indigenous Spanish or mixed of them, you were a dirty Mexican by virtue of the West and how it got won. And in there's some treaties that were not honored. There's the annexation of Texas. There's a bunch of different ways that the English settlers domineered the Spanish settlers in what was now the American territory. Okay, so we've just got all of this history mixed up, plus the intermixing of indigenous and African, intermixing of indigenous and Spanish and French, and all of that happening. So I can only speak to what I know of my own bloodline and my own experience. I do know, and this is where I'm getting to the meat of this, and we're going to do a couple of these videos in a series. What I wanted to talk about was how white supremacy exists in all of us and how it makes us unsafe and feel unsafe, and how the harm is caused by whiteness to people who are not of the white manifest destiny West was one descendants and people who identify as white, and how they're all harmed in and of themselves. Okay, so personally, I was the little güerita in my upbringing, the light-skinned girl, right? All my family members are darker than me, and I just follow the Spanish intermixing, even though I have mad indigenous blood as well. Furthermore, because my parents were both freedom fighters, my mother in the Crusade for Justice and with her indigenous line, and my father in the United Farm Workers Movement and his very like Mexican American familial upbringing, they met and made me, and my mother raised us doing indigenous ceremonies on the Red Road after having connected to her indigenous roots by way of the Mexica tradition, as well as the Dene tradition and the Lakota tradition during the Civil Rights Movement. So here you have me, little light-skinned Chicanita, raised in ceremony indigenous ways, but completely just like bullied, I guess is the right word, bullied by everybody who I grew up with. So if you look at the history of the Genizaros, of the first mixed bloods, who were neither honored by the Spanish or the indigenous, who were actually like warred upon because they were actual shields from the indigenous attacks toward the Spanish settlements. That's one thing. Then you have the manifest destiny English settlers coming west and saying, actually, I own this, I own you, subjugate yourself. The choice that was made by my grandparents and by many people of mixed blood ancestry, specifically who wanted to be more Spanish, or more than be Spanish, be white after manifest destiny came, because if you were Spanish or Spanish speaking, you were a target. These are the ways that my ancestors stopped honoring their own selves. Okay? So when then you put a layer during the Civil Rights Movement, my mother and father, who were clear mestizos, both of them wanted to honor their indigeneity and honor the huelga and honor the fights for justice. And then they had me, and I'm a little güerita, right? So here we are after 5, 10, however many years, generations of racial intermixing. And one of my elders, Ramon del Castillo, he's a academic here in the Chicano civil rights people. And during Cinco de Mayo, we used to have a big celebration. I think I was 12 or 11 or 12. And I was like butthurt because my fellow kids were just ranking on me hard because I was the güerita. And I went to him crying, and he's like, mija, we come in all different colors. And I was like, oh, okay, we come in all different colors because we're all mixed. But when my grandparents were being discriminated against, especially my very indigena looking grandmother, by the white manifest destiny comers, they didn't want any part in it. Right? They didn't want to suffer. They didn't want to be hurt. So they tried to assimilate and be as white as possible. Then my mother's generation was like, I'm not white, I'm brown, I'm indigenous. Actually, this is the forgotten indigeneity. This is the erasure that had to go on so that they could survive. Then they indigenized us like crazy, right? And we had our different ceremonies, like every summer in Chupantla, every springtime you're out dancing, you're traveling all over California, New Mexico to Danza Azteca, everything, and doing all these ceremonies, which was a really cool way. That's how she kept us out of like gangs and gang violence and barrio warfare, which was very real for us growing up. But we learned like, fuck the white man, the white man did all these things, the white man is horrible, which is all true by virtue of the history. But when you learn fuck the white man your whole life, and because white supremacy was so insidious to take away indigeneity and blackness and make you feel like you are less than a human being for being indigenous, for being black, for being other than this made up notion of white, then when you're raised in an indigenous circle and you look like I look, you're the fucking bad guy, right? You're the like one that doesn't belong. So I just finally want to like really address this, because I feel like I honor my indigeneity. I honor all my ancestors. I've been trying to heal. I'm a healer. I put my hands on white people and brown people and black people and Asian people and mixed people. I've seen some fucked up shit in everybody's wombs and everybody's ancestors. I've seen the white supremacist ancestors that are fucked up. I've seen the slavery stuff in people, and it's all crazy, right? But what white supremacy has done to all of us, and not just the ones you can see it in, but all of us, is made us enemies to ourselves. Okay? So what is necessary right now is untying the knots of self-hatred that white supremacy has done. And for me, what that's looked like for me as the güerita indígena raised in Danza Azteca in the east side with a bunch of black people as my friends and brown people. Honestly, the black people were nicer to me than the brown people, because the brown people were like, oh, little light-skinned bitch. Because it wasn't cool to be brown, right? Like the lighter you were, the more privileged you were, which is still the case, clearly. But when you're raised with all the brown people and you're the light-skinned one, you're the like one they hate. And so I hated myself, and I still have these things, and I haven't been speaking a lot because I'm like, I'm too light-skinned to talk about anything. And that's this like how do I heal the parts of me that need healing so I can be healing? And I've had a bunch of white people hit me up, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm light-skinned and I understand that's a privilege, so let me do this cultural, spiritual, etc. labor for the white ones who want to heal. And basically what I'm telling them is y'all need to heal your own internalized shit. So what I've seen that look like is white supremacy is pretty ugly on the inside. We're looking at incest. We're looking at once unfortunately, once slavery ended, the emancipation happened, the abuse cycles didn't end. The abuse cycles turned on white women and white children, as well as cop violence on black bodies, right? So we're looking at incest. We're looking at horrible beatings. We're looking at mental manipulation. We're looking at money being more important than who you are. And all that stuff needs to heal inside of whiteness. Now, when it comes to Chicanismo, because of the double colonizer, like there wasn't an ability to be down with being indigenous, and there was an ability to be down with Spanish because the Spanish raped the indigenous, and there was this whole Genisado thing where there was no equality for mixed bloods, and it was effed up. Look it up. Then you have the white supremacists coming over and saying, oh, well, you're just a dirty Mexican. So this movement back to indigeneity, there's mad Chicanos who are like not holding space for the fact that we're like born of rape. And there's this othering that happens where it's like, nah, I'm not white, which we're not like New England manifest destiny or white, but we're like still European Spanish descendancy white. And when we're not letting that be real, when we're saying, nah, fuck that, I'm indigenous. Yes, you're indigenous, and that's the rapee. But the raper was a fucking colonizing motherfucker, and that person needs healing in you too. And the way you heal is by acknowledging it. And a light-skinned girl like me doesn't have the privilege, if you will, of only claiming my indigeneity, because it's clear that I'm not only indigenous. Like, the older I get, the more I feel like I look indigenous. But even the fact that I have to be like scared to be the person that I came here to be because of white supremacy, because of colorism, because of the fucked up reality of what American history is it just points to the necessity of the healing that is needed. So I really want to encourage everybody who's mixed, or everybody, honestly, let's be real about it. Every fucking person in America and around the world, because conquest is clearly a thing. It's time for us to really tune into ourselves and look at our European ancestry, no matter where it comes from. Look at our African ancestry. I went into meditation the other day because according to my ancestry.com, I found out I have 5-ish% African blood in me. And I went into my ancestors, and my dream space told me that was on my Arapaho line. And then I looked at my great grandmother, and you can see it. So I can talk a whole lot about like what came through for me with that, but I don't look that, and I don't live in a Black body, so it's not my place to talk about Black healing. But I could talk about my own healing and what it looks like to commune with the ancestors of that part of my diaspora. When we are American, we have to recognize that regardless of our ancestry, we are consistently being poisoned by white supremacy. And so we have to look at the ways we fuck with white supremacy in our bodies. One of the ways that we heavy fuck with white supremacy is colorism, right? Like, the lighter skinned you are, the more privileged you are. So how do you leverage that privilege? But if you were raised in like predominantly indigenous circles like me, and were completely ostracized from your own community because of how you look, then you have to be willing to forgive like your own people for hating you, right? That's like where my work has been. It's nuanced. This is super nuanced. So I saw something today, and I didn't disagree with it. It was a woman talking about white people can't capitalize off Black Lives Matter, which I agree with, by trying to heal discrimination and healing racism, which makes sense. And I'm a huge proponent of segregated healing spaces, because not all people are able to heal the same things. But what I do think white people should be doing together, and specifically white people who are the descendants of the Mayflower, who are the descendants of Manifest Destiny, who are the trust fund babies from Cotton Money, etc., you guys need to be healing your own ancestral shit and talking about how fucked up it is and mourning it together. Because now in this human space where we're like realizing, oh, this shit's not cool. We can't just be killing Black people. We can't just be fucking racist pigs, right? Literally and figuratively. You have to go in and be like, where does that exist? And cry about it and pain about it and heal about it and talk about it with each other. And then look to Black voices and look to brown voices and indigenous voices to see how you can make it better now. But first you have to face it together, in my opinion, as a healer person. Okay? Us indigenous Spanish mutts have to really reckon with the fact that we're straight up the descendants of colonial rape. Straight up, you know? We have to reckon, like, me personally, I have to reckon with the fact that, like, my legacy, my lineage is super broken, and and also honor the parts that weren't broken, like the hands-on healing. I learned that from my grandmother, and she learned it from her mother, etc., 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 right? But, like, as far as language-wise, as far as not knowing what grandparent, what indigenous person had sex with what mixed person, etc. Like, that's for me to heal and go into my ancestral healing space about, right? So this I'm going to stop soon. There's so much that we could talk about healing our ancestry, especially white people. But I want to talk about harm for a second, and what for my white people here, what cultural appropriation harm looks like, and why, what harm actually looks like, and how it's triggered in brown and black bodies. Well, in brown bodies, let me not speak for black people. Anybody who lives in a black body out there, I am super down to be checked by anything that you want to offer, or if you want to type in what you can share, go for it, please. Okay, so now I'm talking about harm. So what harm looks like is something I've heard referred to as ethnocide. So if you look at the history of indigenous erasure and the history of slavery and rape therein of both of them, what you'll find is a bunch of people who were completely unable to be themselves. A bunch of people who were ripped from their languages, who were ripped from their homelands. I don't even have a homeland, right? Like, I have some places in New Mexico that we have a connection to, but like, my indigenous ancestry is all over the southwest board, and there's no place for us there anymore. I've never been to Spain, right? Ripped from your homeland, ripped from your ceremonies, ripped from your customs, ripped from your second language. In my case, like, then first we were conquered by Spanish, and then we spoke Spanish, and then we were conquered by the Americans, and then we spoke English. And my grandma used to get beat in school, literally beat with a fucking stick for speaking Spanish. Okay, so guess what? She didn't teach my mom Spanish. I had to learn my Spanish from my dad's side, and like making mistakes, and live through this like deep fucking shame for not being able to speak Spanish, not even the whole indigenous language thing, right? So there's this shame that lives in my body. There's the fear of speaking a language that lives in my body because my grandma used to get beat literally for speaking that language. So what harm looks like is that not only the privilege of the resources, like, oh, I went to Mexico and I took this course because my family knows how to save, because my family has access to understanding property, because my family's been property owners for generations, starting with the slave trade and your stolen land. That's harmful privilege. That you do not have to see the ways you are able to embrace the joy of a cultural inheritance that was not beaten out of your grandmother. Okay? So this is harm. This is where, if you are a white person with white privilege who takes your, what do they call it? Your mission trip to Africa, and then you come back with all this beautiful understanding of textiles and African drumming, how that is harmful to a person who is the descendant of slavery, who's never had the monetary resources or the mental understanding, the spiritual permission to be in joy of their drumming traditions, because it was literally beaten out of their ancestors, and that lives in their recent ancestral DNA. That is harm. Okay, that is how white privilege and appropriation is harming to people of color. And regardless of how dark their skin is, regardless of how much Spanish blood is shown through my phenotype, my indigenous ass blood remembers the beatings. Okay? So that's harm. So I have one more example to share of this. I have a friend who I love very dearly, who is a white person, who once did a thing that she called frijoles and something else. The ease with which she could use the word frijoles in a public event was harmful to me. Because my grandmother was beaten for speaking her language, and I could not, with as much ease, use that, not only because of the fact that that was beaten out of me, but also because I was discriminated against for my skin color in my own culture. That was then, I was always scared to be brown because the brown people that I loved called me not brown. Moreover, because I wasn't brown enough, I inserted myself amongst white people because they exotified me and accepted me, but then they also told me, oh, you're not brown like them. So they also erased my indigeneity. So this is like erasure upon erasure upon erasure that so many of us experience every day in different ways than I did. So what white privilege does is takes you away from yourself over and over and over and over and over again, and makes it okay for someone else to have, for specifically those with white privilege to have what was forcibly, violently taken away from you. That now in your DNA, you are even unable to conjure for yourself because it was literally like upon the punishment of death taken away from you. This is why I'm so passionate about birth work. This is why I'm so passionate about ceremony work. Because I know in my bones what happened when it was taken away from my ancestors. And I'm trying to undo that, unlearn that. All right. Thank you for listening. I am going to read back through some comments here. Tanya says, hell yeah. Oh my God, the struggle, not indigenous enough for the indigenous, not white enough for the white people. I can't deal. Yeah, it's hard. We're all fucked up because of colonialism. Everybody. Hey, Remy, long time. Hi, Linda. Cecilia, what's up? Native Mexican and Spanish. So when we say Native Mexican, this is interesting too, because Mexican is literally the mix. So the Mexica people were the Aztec Empire, who also, and this is going to be contentious, but I learned this from my historian mother, did a lot of raping and pillaging themselves because they were the empire. And the reason why the Spanish even won that war is because a bunch of the littler tribes who the Mexica were oppressing rose up with the Spanish against them. There's a lot of historical stuff you want to look into, but if you're Native Mexican and Spanish, you're indigenous and Spanish. So like somebody said the other day, like, I'm a full-blood Mexican. I'm like, what exactly does that mean? Because like Mexicans by virtue of history are not full bloods. There could be the people indigenous of Mexico, but like colorism exists there too, because there's people with more white privilege, more white blood, Spanish blood, and less. Hi, mijito.
Oh, sorry, you live?
Yeah,
Oh.
it's okay. My family's home.
Hello.
My mom didn't teach us Spanish for the same reason. Yeah, because your ass would get beaten. She didn't want us to get hit for the same reason. No more fear. Abuela was trying to protect us. We need to heal for Abuela. So we have to heal for our ancestors, yo. And again, this isn't just for brown people and black people. This is for white people too. You have to come to terms with your ancestry. And this might not all be slave-owning, land-stealing white people, right? But your ancestors also came and lost their Italian culture, lost their Swedish culture, lost their Irish culture, and caved to whiteness, which isn't actually a thing. Okay, so there's healing that needs to be done there too. And we also have to realize that when we are participating in colorism, when we are saying that people aren't certain amounts of indigenous or certain amounts of black or dark enough or light enough, that we are literally reifying white supremacy, which told us originally that if you're 1/8 black, then you're still black. Okay, that's white people. All right, which told us originally that you have to be 1/16 native in order to claim it. And if you don't live on a reservation, you're not native. That was indigenous erasure. So don't be over there trying to be all policing people's blood. That's white supremacy, so you know. The wound is exacerbated with appropriation, the pain of becoming the melting pot. Besitos, I love you, hermana. Hey, brother Cuauhtemoc, I love you too. Native Texas, Coahuiltecan. Beautiful words. Snake life. We literally have no land. My ancestors are from the north and south of the border. What's up, Jorge? Long time. Hi, Jessica, Miss Lopez. All right, let's see what the Instagram homies have to say. This is a big topic. I encourage y'all to talk about it, right? To talk about your own pain of colonialism. And I also want to hold space and honor for my Black friends, my kindred, my brothers and sisters, and non-conforming people, all of the Black bodies that have been doing this work and opening up these spaces for us all to heal. And I really want to hold space for George Floyd and all of the Black lives taken by police brutality and by slavery. Thank you. Thank you for the healing you're doing with all of us right now. Follow Lady's speech, Sankofa, she's the one that I want to be led by. I know that there are so many accounts doing really good anti-racist work. I encourage people to really unearth their own fuck shit, man. Your internalized white supremacy, your internalized colonialism, your internalized self-hatred because of white supremacy. None of us are immune to it. Okay? Radical acceptance is the cornerstone to healing. You taught me that. Thank you, Christy. I love you. I'm still working on radical acceptance. I still am like, I better put on dark lipstick so I don't look so wet up. See, I'm still trying to unlearn shit. Yes, yes, yes. This is absolutely what we got to do. Hello, beautifuls. Thank you for joining me. Hi, Yenny. Shout outs from the Bronx. Thank you for joining me. You look absolutely beautiful, hermana. Thank you. Tlazokamati for all your teachings. I've learned so much from you and I appreciate you. Ometeo, thank you for telling me that. I appreciate you. I'm going to come on here with my mama one day. She's a bit camera shy, but she will school everybody. She schools everybody all the time. She's pretty badass. She schooled me my whole life. I love you too, Ninoshka. Nice to see you. Okay, so I'm going to do another one of these. I barely got to stuff. A big thing I want to talk about is just colorism amongst Chicanos, and specifically our like European denial syndrome, which doesn't allow us full healing. Because in order to heal, you have to witness. Okay, so right now, I just want you all to remember who you are. And see, I learned something from my comadre Panquetzani today on one of her calls. She said that when she's feeling in a meditation and she's feeling emotional, you can't heal from a charged place. You have to see things for what they are. And as my mother taught me from her time with the great Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, he used to say, it isn't what you think it is what it is. So you have to look at what it is in order to heal it. And you can't see it for what it is if you're emotionally charged about it. So first we have to feel the fuck out of our emotions. Feel your grief, feel your pain, feel your anger of the way of things. And then when you first feel that, then you can be like, okay, how do I heal from this? Show me what I have to do to heal this. And what Panke said today is she imagines herself on a number line at the 0, and to the right, you guys know in math, right? There's +5 or -5. And if -5 is negative feelings and +5 is positive feelings, and you're like veering some way, then stop and imagine yourself in the middle. Thank you, Panke, for teaching me this today. So that you're not all charged when you're asking yourself what your healing is, okay? So it doesn't matter what color you are. Look in, go in, heal yourself first so you can act from a place that is healing. All right? I'm super open to anybody checking me and my privilege, helping me understand better. I can only speak from my place as a Chicanita raised in what was the hood that's now gentrified, in a Mexica dance group a la Chicanidad. Going to ceremonies my whole life, and then I left home and I went to Stanford, and that's a whole other fucking privilege-ass story that we'll talk about later. Aiming for the 0. Orale, orale. Okay. Hola, querido mío. Say hi to everybody. Okay. Many blessings. Talk soon. Ciao.